The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. Chapter 49. Fatality. Meantime, Milady, drunk with passion, roaring on the deck like a lioness that has been embarked, had been tempted to throw herself into the sea that she might regain the coast, for she could not rid of the thought that she had been insulted by D'Artagnan, threatened by Athos, and that she had quit France without being revenged on them. This idea soon became so insupportable to her that at the risk of whatever terrible consequences might result to herself from it, she implored the captain to put her on shore. But the captain, eager to escape from his false position, placed between France and English cruisers, like the bat between the mice and the birds, was in great haste to regain England, and positively refused to obey what he took for a woman's caprice. Promising his passenger, who had been particularly recommended to him by the cardinal, to land her, if the sea and the French permitted him, at one of the ports of Brittany, either at Lorient or Brest. But the wind was contrary, the sea bad. They tacked and kept offshore. 9 days after leaving the Charente, pale with fatigue and vexation, Milady saw only the blue coasts of Finisterre appear. She calculated that to cross this corner of France and return to the cardinal, it would take her at least 3 days. Add another day for landing, and that would make 4. Add these 4 to the 9 others, that would be 13 days lost. Just 13 days, during which so many important events might pass in London. She reflected likewise that the cardinal would be furious at her return, and consequently would be more disposed to listen to the complaints brought against her than to the accusations she brought against others. She allowed the vessel to pass Lorient and Brest, without repeating her request to the captain, who, on his part, took care not to remind her of it. Milady therefore continued her voyage, and on the very day that Planchet embarked at Portsmouth for France, the messenger of his Eminence entered the port in triumph. All the city was agitated by an extraordinary movement. 4 large vessels, recently built, had just been launched. At the end of the jetty, his clothes richly laced with gold, glittering, as was customary with him, with diamonds and precious stones, his hat ornamented with a white feather which drooped upon his shoulder, Buckingham was seen surrounded by a staff almost as brilliant as himself. It was one of those rare and beautiful days in winter when England remembers that there is a sun. The star of day, pale but nevertheless still splendid, was setting in the horizon, glorifying at once the heavens and the sea with bands of fire, and casting upon the towers and the old houses of the city a last ray of gold which made the windows sparkle like the reflection of a conflagration. Breathing that sea breeze, so much more invigorating and balsamic as the land is approached, contemplating all the power of those preparations she was commissioned to destroy, all the power of that army which she was to combat alone, she, a woman with a few bags of gold. Milady compared herself mentally to Judith, the terrible Jewess, when she penetrated the camp of the Assyrians and beheld the enormous mass of chariots, horses, men, and arms, which a gesture of her hand was to dissipate like a cloud of smoke. They entered the roadstead, but as they drew near in order to cast an anchor, a little cutter, looking like a coast guard formidably armed, approached the merchant vessel and dropped into the sea a boat which directed its course to the latter. This boat contained an officer, a mate, and 8 rowers. The officer alone went on board, where he was received with all the deference inspired by the uniform. The officer conversed a few instants with the captain, gave him several papers, of which he was the bearer, to read, and, upon the order of the merchant captain, the whole crew of the vessel, both passengers and sailors, were called upon deck. When this species of summons was made, the officer inquired aloud the point of the brig's departure, its route, its landings. And to all these questions the captain replied without difficulty and without hesitation. Then the officer began to pass in review all the people one after the other, and stopping when he came to Milady, surveyed her very closely, but without addressing a single word to her. He then returned to the captain, said a few words to him, and, as if from the moment the vessel was under his command, he ordered a maneuver which the crew executed immediately. Then the vessel resumed its course, still escorted by the little cutter, which sailed side by side with it, menacing it with the mouths of its 6 cannon. The boat followed in the wake of the ship, a speck near the enormous mass. During the examination of Milady by the officer, as well may be imagined, Milady on her part was not less scrutinizing in her glances. But however great was the power of this woman, with eyes of flame and reading the hearts of those whose secrets she wished to divine, she met this time with a countenance of such impassivity that no discovery followed her investigation. The officer who had stopped in front of her and studied her with so much care that might have been 25 or 26 years of age. He was of pale complexion with clear blue eyes, rather deeply set. His mouth, fine and well cut, remained motionless in its correct lines. His chin, strongly marked, denoted that strength of will which in the ordinary Britannic type denotes mostly nothing but obstinacy. A brow a little receding, as is proper for poets, enthusiasts, and soldiers, was scarcely shaded by short, thin hair which, like the beard, which covered the lower part of his face, was of a beautiful, deep chestnut color. When they entered the port, it was already night. The fog increased the darkness and formed the stern lights and lanterns of the jetty a circle like that which surrounds the moon when the weather threatens to become rainy. The air they breathed was heavy, damp, and cold. Milady, that woman so courageous and firm, shivered in spite of herself. The officer desired to have Milady's packages point out to him and ordered them to be placed in the boat. When this operation was complete, he invited her to descend by offering her his hand. Milady looked at this man and hesitated. "Who are you, sir?" asked she, "who has the kindness to trouble yourself so particularly on my account?" "You may perceive, madam, by my uniform, that I am an officer in the English Navy," replied the young man. "But is it the custom for the officers in the English Navy to place themselves at the service of their female compatriots when they land in a port of Great Britain, and carry their gallantry so far as to conduct them ashore?" "Yes, madame, it is the custom, not from gallantry, but prudence, that in time of war foreigners should be conducted to particular hotels, in order that they may remain under the eye of the government till full information can be obtained about them." These words were pronounced with the most exact politeness and the most perfect calmness. Nevertheless, they had not the power of convincing Milady. "But I am not a foreigner, sir," said she, with an accent as pure as ever was heard between Portsmouth and Manchester. "My name is Lady Cleric, and this measure—" "This measure is general, madame, and you will seek in vain to evade it." "I will follow you then, sir." Accepting the hand of the officer, she began the descent of the ladder, at the foot of which the boat waited. The officer followed her. A large cloak was spread at the stern. The officer requested her to sit down upon this cloak, and placed himself beside her. "Row!" said he to the sailors. The 8 oars fell at once into the sea, making but a single sound, giving but a single stroke, and the boat seemed to fly over the surface of the water. In 5 minutes they gained the land. The officer leaped to the pier and offered his hand to Milady. A carriage was in waiting. "Is this carriage for us?" asked Milady. "Yes, madame," replied the officer. "The hotel, then, is far away?" "At the other end of the town." "Very well," said Milady, and she resolutely entered the carriage. The officer saw that the baggage was fastened carefully behind the carriage, and this operation ended, he took his place beside Milady and shut the door. Immediately, without any order being given or his place of destination indicated, the coachman set off at a rapid pace and plunged into the streets of the city. So strange a reception naturally gave Milady ample matter for reflection. So seeing that the young officer did not seem at all disposed for conversation, she reclined in her corner of the carriage, and, one after the other, passed in review all the surmises which presented themselves to her mind. At the end of a quarter of an hour, however, surprised at the length of the journey, she leaned forward toward the door to see whither she was being conducted. Houses were no longer to be seen. Trees appeared in the darkness like great black phantoms chasing one another. Milady shuddered. "But we are no longer in the city, sir," said she. The young officer preserved silence. "I beg you to understand, sir, I will go no farther unless you tell me whither you are taking me." This threat brought no reply. "Oh, this is too much!" cried Milady. "Help! Help!" No voice replied to her as the carriage continued to roll on with rapidity. The officer seemed a statue. Milady looked at the officer with one of those terrible expressions peculiar to her countenance and which so rarely failed of their effect. Anger made her eyes flash in the darkness. The young man remained immovable. Milady tried to open the door in order to throw herself out. "Take care, madame," said the young man coolly. "You will kill yourself in jumping." Milady reseated herself, foaming. The officer leaned forward, looked at her in his turn, and appeared surprised to see that face just before, so beautiful, distorted with passion and almost hideous. The artful creature at once comprehended that she was injuring herself by allowing him thus to read her soul. She collected her features, and in a complaining voice said, "In the name of heaven, sir, tell me if it is you. If it is to your government, if it is to an enemy I am to attribute the violence that is done to me." "No violence will be offered to you, madame, and what happens to you is the result of a very simple measure which we are obliged to adopt with all who land in England." "Then you don't know me, sir?" "It is the first time I have had the honor of seeing you." "And on your honor you have no cause of hatred against me?" "None, I swear to you." There was so much serenity, coolness, mildness even in the voice of the young man that Milady felt reassured. At length, after a journey of nearly an hour, the carriage stopped before an iron gate, which closed an avenue leading to a castle severe in form, massive, and isolated. Then, as the wheels rolled over a fine gravel, Milady could hear a vast roaring, which she at once recognized as the noise of the sea dashing against some steep cliff. The carriage passed under two arched gateways, and at length stopped in a court large, dark, and square. Almost immediately the door of the carriage was opened. The young man sprang lightly out and presented his hand to Milady, who leaned upon it, and in her turn alighted with tolerable calmness. "Still, then, I am a prisoner," said Milady, looking around her and bringing back her eyes with a most gracious smile to the young officer. "But I feel assured it will not be for long," added she. "My own conscience and your politeness, sir, are the guarantees of that." However flattering this compliment, the officer made no reply, but drawing from his belt a little silver whistle, such as boatswains use in ships of war, he whistled 3 times with 3 different modulations. Immediately several men appeared, who unharnessed the smoking horses and put the carriage into a coach-house. Then the officer, with the same calm politeness, invited his prisoner to enter the house. She, with a still smiling countenance, took his arm, and passed with him under a low arched door, which, by a vaulted passage, lighted only at the farther end, led to a stone staircase around an angle of stone. They then came to a massive door, which, after the induction into the lock of a key which the young man carried with him, turned heavily upon its hinges and disclosed the chamber destined for Milady. With a single glance, the prisoner took in the apartment in its minutest details. It was a chamber whose furniture was at once appropriate for a prisoner or a free man, and yet bars at the windows and outside bolts at the door decided the question in favor of the prison. In an instant, all the strength of mind of this creature, though drawn from the most vigorous sources, abandoned her. She sank into a large, easy chair with her arms crossed, her head lowered, and expecting every instant to see a judge enter to interrogate her. But no one entered except 2 or 3 Marines, who brought her trunks and packages, deposited them in a corner, and retired without speaking. The officer superintended all these details with the same calmness Milady had constantly seen him, never pronouncing a word himself and making himself obeyed by a gesture of his hand or a sound of his whistle. It might have been said that between this man and his inferiors spoken language did not exist or had become useless. At length, Milady could hold out no longer. She broke the silence.
"In the name of heaven, sir," cried she, "what means all this is passing? Put an end to my doubts. I have courage enough for any danger I can foresee, for every misfortune which I understand. Where am I? Why am I here? If I am free, why these bars and these doors? If I am a prisoner, what crime have I committed?"
"You are here in the apartment destined for you, madame. I received orders to go and take charge of you on the sea and to conduct you to this castle. This order, I believe, I accomplished with all the exactness of a soldier, but also with the courtesy of a gentleman. There terminates, at least to the present moment, the duty I had to fulfill towards you. The rest concerns another person."
"And who is that other person?" asked Milady warmly. "Can you not tell me his name?"
At that moment a great jingling of spurs was heard on the stairs. Some voices passed and faded away, and the sound of a single footstep approached the door. "That person is here, madame," said the officer, leaving the entrance open and drawing himself up in an attitude of respect. At the same time the door opened. A man appeared on the threshold. He was without a hat, carried a sword, and flourished a handkerchief in his hand. Milady thought she recognized this shadow in the gloom. She ported herself with one hand upon the arm of the chair and advanced her head as if to meet a certainty. The stranger advanced slowly, and as he advanced, after entering into the circle of light projected by the lamp, Milady involuntarily drew back. Then, when she had no longer any doubt, she cried in a state of stupor,
"What? My brother? Is it you?"
"Yes, fair lady," replied Lord de Winter, making a bow, half courteous, half ironical. "It is I, myself."
"But this castle, then?"
"Is mine."
"This chamber?"
"Is yours."
"I am then your prisoner?"
"Nearly so."
"But this is a frightful abuse of power."
"No high-sounding words. Let us sit down and chat quietly, as brother and sister ought to do." Then turning toward the door, and seeing that the young officer was waiting for his last orders, he said, "All is well, I thank you. Now leave us alone, Mr. Felton." Chapter 50. Chat between brother and sister. During the time which Lord de Winter took to shut the door, close a shutter, and draw a chair near to his sister-in-law's fauteuil, Milady, anxiously thoughtful, plunged her glance into the depths of possibility, and discovered all the plan, of which she could not even obtain a glance as long as she was ignorant to whose hands she had fallen. She knew her brother-in-law to be a worthy gentleman, a bold hunter, an intrepid player, enterprising with women, but by no means remarkable for his skill in intrigues. How had he discovered her arrival, and caused her to be seized? Why did he detain her? Athos had dropped some words which proved that the conversation she had with the cardinal had fallen into outside ears, but she could not suppose that he had dug a countermine so promptly and so boldly. She rather feared that her preceding operations in England might have been discovered. Buckingham might have guessed that it was she who cut off the 2 studs and avenged himself for that little treachery. But Buckingham was incapable of going to any excess against a woman, particularly if that woman was supposed to have acted from a feeling of jealousy. This supposition appeared to her most reasonable. It seemed to her that they wanted to revenge the past and not to anticipate the future. At all events, she congratulated herself upon having fallen into the hands of her brother-in-law, whom she reckoned she could deal very easily, rather than into the hands of an acknowledged and intelligent enemy.
"Yes, let us chat, brother,"
said she, with a kind of cheerfulness, decided as she was to draw from the conversation, in spite of all the dissimulation Lord de Winter could bring, the revelations of which she stood in need to regulate her future conduct. "You have, then, decided to come to England again?" said Lord de Winter, "in spite of the resolutions you so often expressed in Paris, never to set foot on British ground?" Milady replied to this question by another question.
"To begin with, tell me," said she, "have you watched me so closely as to be aware beforehand not only of my arrival, but even of the day, the hour, and the port at which I should arrive?"
Lord de Winter adopted the same tactics as Milady, thinking that, as his sister-in-law employed them, they must be the best. "But tell me, dear sister," replied he, "what makes you come to England?"
"I came to see you,"
replied Milady, without knowing how much she aggravated by this reply the suspicions to which D'Artagnan's letter had given birth in the mind of her brother-in-law, and only desiring to gain the goodwill of her auditor by a falsehood. "Ah, to see me," said De Winter, cunningly.
"To be sure, to see you. What is there astonishing in that?"
"And you had no other object in coming to England but to see me?"
"No."
"So it was for me alone you have taken the trouble to cross the Channel?"
"For you alone."
"The deuce! What tenderness, my sister!"
"But am I not your nearest relative?"
demanded Milady, with the tone of the most touching ingenuousness. "And my only heir, are you not?" said Lord de Winter in his turn, fixing his eyes on those of Milady. Whatever command she had over herself, Milady could not help starting. And as in pronouncing the last words, Lord de Winter placed his hand upon the arm of his sister, this start did not escape him. In fact, the blow was direct and severe. The first idea that occurred to Milady's mind was that she had been betrayed by Kitty, and that she had recounted to the Baron the selfish aversion toward himself of which she had imprudently allowed some marks to escape before her servant. She also recollected the furious and imprudent attack she had made upon D'Artagnan when he spared the life of her brother.
"I do not understand, my lord,"
said she, in order to gain time and make her adversary speak out.
"What do you mean to say? Is there any secret meaning concealed beneath your words?"
"Oh, my God, no," said Lord de Winter, with apparent good nature. "You wish to see me, and you come to England. I learn this desire, or rather I suspect that you feel it, and in order to spare you all the annoyances of a nocturnal arrival in a port and all the fatigues of landing, I send one of my officers to meet you. I place a carriage at his orders, and he brings you hither to this castle, of which I am the governor, whither I come every day, and where, in order to satisfy our mutual desire of seeing each other, I have prepared you a chamber. What is there more astonishing in all that I have said to you than what you have told me?"
"No, what I think astonishing is that you should expect my coming."
"And yet that is the most simple thing in the world, my dear sister. Have you not observed that the captain of your little vessel, upon entering the roadstead, sent forward, in order to obtain permission to enter the port, a little boat bearing his log-book and the register of his voyages? I am commandant of the port. They brought me that book. I recognized your name in it. My heart told me what your mouth has just confirmed, that is to say, with what view you have exposed yourself to the dangers of a sea so perilous, or at least so troublesome at the moment, and I sent my cutter to meet you. You know the rest." Milady knew that Lord de Winter lied, and she was the more alarmed.
"My brother," continued she, "was not that my Lord Buckingham whom I saw on the jetty this evening as we arrived?"
"Himself." "Ah, I can understand how the sight of him struck you," replied Lord de Winter. You came from a country where he must be very much talked of, and I know that his armaments against France greatly engaged the attention of your friend the Cardinal."
"My friend the Cardinal?"
cried Milady, seeing that on this point, as on the other, Lord de Winter seemed well instructed. "Is he not your friend?" replied the Baron, negligently. "Pardon, I thought so, but we will return to my Lord Duke presently. Let us not depart from the sentimental turn our conversation had taken. You came, you say, to see me."
"Yes."
"Well, I reply that you shall be served to the height of your wishes, and that we shall see each other every day."
"And am I, then, to remain here eternally?"
demanded Milady with a certain terror. "You find yourself badly lodged, sister. Demand anything you want, and I will hasten to have you furnished with it."
"But I have neither my women nor my servants."
"You shall have all, madame. Tell me on what footing your household was established by your first husband, and although I am only your brother-in-law, I will arrange one similar."
"My first husband?"
cried Milady, looking at Lord de Winter with eyes almost starting from their sockets. "Yes, your French husband. I don't speak of my brother. If you have forgotten, as he is still living, I can write to him, and he will send me information on the subject." A cold sweat burst from the brow of Milady.
"You jest,"
said she in a hollow voice. "Do I look so?" asked the Baron, rising and going a step forward.
"Or rather, you insult me,"
continued she, pressing with her stiffened hands the two arms of her easy-chair and raising herself upon her wrists. "I insult you?" said Lord de Winter, with contempt. "In truth, madame, do you think that can be possible?"
"Indeed, sir," said Milady, "you must be either drunk or mad. Leave the room and send me a woman."
"Women are very indiscreet, my sister. Cannot I serve you as a waiting-maid? By that means all our secrets will remain in the family."
"Insolent!"
cried Milady, and, as if acted upon by a spring, she bounded toward the Baron, who awaited her attack with his arms crossed, but nevertheless with one hand on the hilt of his sword. "Come," said he. "I know you are accustomed to assassinate people, but I warn you I shall defend myself, even against you."
"You are right," said Milady. "You have all the appearance of being cowardly enough to lift your hand against a woman."
"Perhaps so. And I have an excuse, for mine would not be the first hand of the man that has been placed upon you, I imagine." And as the Baron pointed with a slow and accusing gesture to the left shoulder of Milady, which he almost touched with his finger, Milady uttered a deep, inward shriek and retreated to the corner of the room like a panther which crouches for a spring. "Oh, growl as much as you please," cried Lord de Winter, "but don't try to bite, for I warn you that it would be to your disadvantage. There are no procurators who regulate successions beforehand. There is no knight-errant to come and seek a quarrel with me on account of the fair lady I detained as prisoner, but I have judges quite ready who will quickly dispose of a woman so shameless as to glide, a bigamist, into the bed of Lord de Winter, my brother, and these judges, I warn you, will soon send you to an executioner who will make both your shoulders alike." The eyes of Milady darted such flashes that, although he was a man and armed before an unarmed woman, he felt the chill of fear glide through his whole frame. However, he continued all the same, but with increasing warmth. "Yes, I can very well understand that after having inherited the fortune of my brother, it would be very agreeable to you to be my heir likewise, but know beforehand, if you kill me or cause me to be killed, my precautions are taken. Not a penny of what I possess will pass into your hands. Were you not already rich enough, you who possess nearly 1,000,000? And could you not stop your fatal career if you did not do evil for the infinite and supreme joy of doing it? Oh, be assured, if the memory of my brother were not sacred to me, you should rot in a state dungeon or satisfy the curiosity of the sailors at Tyburn. I will be silent, but you must endure your captivity quietly. In 15 or 20 days I shall set out for La Rochelle with the army, but on the eve of my departure a vessel which I shall see depart will take you hence and convey you to our colonies in the south. And be assured that you shall be accompanied by one who will blow your brains out at the first attempt you make to return to England or the continent." Milady listened with an attention that dilated her inflamed eyes. "Yes, at present," continued Lord de Winter, "you remain in the castle. The walls are thick, the door strong, and the bars solid. Besides, your window opens immediately over the sea. The men of my crew, who are devoted to me for life and death, mount guard upon this apartment, and watch all the passages that lead to the courtyard. Even if you gained the yard, there would still be 3 iron gates for you to pass. The order is positive. A step, a gesture, a word, on your part, denoting an effort to escape, and you are to be fired upon. If they kill you, English justice will be under an obligation to me for having saved it trouble. Ha! I see your features regain your calmness. Your countenance recovers its assurance. You are saying to yourself, 15 days, 20 days? Bah! I have an inventive mind. Before that is expired, some idea will occur to me. I have an infernal spirit. I shall meet with the victim. Before 15 days are gone, I shall be away from here. Ha! Try it. Milady, finding her thoughts betrayed, dug her nails into her flesh to subdue every emotion that might give to her face any expression except agony. Lord de Winter continued. The officer who commands here in my absence you have already seen, and therefore know him. He knows how, as you must have observed, to obey an order, for you did not, I am sure, come from Portsmouth hither without endeavouring to make him speak. What do you say of him? Could a statue of marble have been more impassive and more mute? You have already tried the power of your seductions upon many men, and unfortunately you have always succeeded. But I give you leave to try them upon this one. Pardieu, if you succeed with him, I pronounce you the demon himself. He went toward the door and opened it hastily. Call Mr. Felton, said he. Wait a minute longer, and I will introduce him to you. There followed between these two personages a strange silence, during which the sound of a slow and regular step was heard approaching. Shortly a human form appeared in the shade of the corridor, and the young lieutenant, with whom we are already acquainted, stopped at the threshold to receive the orders of the Baron. Come in, my dear John, said Lord de Winter. Come in, and shut the door. The young officer entered. Now, said the Baron, look at this woman. She is young. She is beautiful. She possesses all earthly seductions. Well, she is a monster, who, at 25 years of age, has been guilty of as many crimes as you could read of in a year in the archives of our tribunals. Her voice prejudices her hearers in her favor. Her beauty serves as a bait to her victims. Her body even pays what she promises. I must do her that justice. She will try to seduce you. Perhaps she will try to kill you. I have extricated you from misery, Felton. I have caused you to be named lieutenant. I once saved your life, you know, on that occasion. I am, for you, not only a protector, but a friend, not only a benefactor, but a father. This woman has come back into England for the purpose of conspiring against my life. I hold this serpent in my hands. Well, I call you, and I say to you, friend Felton, John, my child, guard me, and more particularly guard yourself against this woman. Swear, by your hopes of salvation, to keep her safely for the chastisement she has merited. John Felton, I trust your word. John Felton, I put faith in your loyalty. My lord, said the young officer, summoning to his mild countenance all the hatred he could find in his heart. My lord, I swear all shall be done as you desire. Milady received this look like a resigned victim. It was impossible to imagine a more submissive or a more mild expression than that which prevailed on her beautiful countenance. Lord de Winter himself could scarcely recognize the tigress who, a minute before, prepared apparently for a fight. She is not to leave this chamber, understand, John, continued the Baron. She is to correspond with nobody. She is to speak to no one but you, if you will do her the honor to address a word with her. That is sufficient, my lord. I have sworn. And now, madame, try to make your peace with God, for you are judged by men. Milady let her head sink as if crushed by this sentence. Lord de Winter went out, making a sign to Felton, who followed him, shutting the door after him. One instant after, the heavy step of a marine, who served as sentinel, was heard in the corridor, his axe in his girdle, his musket on his shoulder. Milady remained for some minutes in the same position, for she thought they might perhaps be examining her through the keyhole. She then slowly raised her head, which had resumed its formidable expression of menace and defiance, ran to the door to listen, looked out of her window, and returning to bury herself again in her large armchair, she reflected. Chapter 51. Officer. Meanwhile, the Cardinal looked anxiously for news from England, but no news arrived that was not annoying and threatening. Although La Rochelle was invested, however certain successes might appear, thanks to the precautions taken, and above all to the dike, which prevented the entrance of any vessel into the besieged city, the blockade might last a long time yet. This was a great affront to the king's army, and a great inconvenience to the cardinal, who had no longer, it is true, to embroil Louis XIII with Anne of Austria, for that affair was over, but he had to adjust matters for Monsieur de Bassompierre, who was embroiled with Duc d'Angoulême. As to Monsieur, who had begun the siege, he left to the cardinal the task of finishing it. The city, notwithstanding the incredible perseverance of its mayor, had attempted a sort of mutiny for a surrender. The mayor had managed and hanged the mutineers. This execution quieted the ill-disposed, who resolved to allow themselves to die of hunger, this death always appearing to them more slow and less sure than strangulation. On their side, from time to time, the besiegers took the messengers which the Rochellais sent to Buckingham, or the spies which Buckingham sent to the Rochellais. In one case or the other, the trial was soon over. The cardinal pronounced the single word, "hanged." The king was invited to come and see the hanging. He came languidly, placing himself in a good situation to see all the details. This amused him sometimes a little, and made him endure the siege with patience, but it did not prevent his getting very tired, or from talking at every moment of returning to Paris, so that if the messengers and the spies had failed, his Eminence, notwithstanding all his inventiveness, would have found himself much embarrassed. Nevertheless, time passed, and the Rochellais did not surrender. The last spy that was taken was the bearer of a letter. This letter told Buckingham that the city was at an extremity, but instead of adding, "If your succor does not arrive within 15 days, we will surrender," it added quite simply, "If your succor comes not within 15 days, we shall all be dead with hunger when it comes." The Rochellais, then, had no hope but in Buckingham. Buckingham was their messiah. It was evident that if they one day leaned positively that they must not count on Buckingham, their courage would fail with their hope. The cardinal looked then with great impatience for the news from England which would announce to him that Buckingham would not come. The question of carrying the city by assault, although often debated in the council of the king, had always been rejected. In the first place, La Rochelle appeared impregnable. Then the cardinal, whatever he said, very well knew that the horror of bloodshed in this encounter, in which Frenchmen would combat against Frenchmen, was a retrograde movement of 60 years impressed upon his policy. And the cardinal was at that period what we now call a man of progress. In fact, the sack of La Rochelle and the assassination of 3,000 or 4,000 Huguenots who allowed themselves to be killed would resemble too closely, in 1628, the massacre of St. Bartholomew in 1572, and then, above all this extreme measure, which was not at all repugnant to the king, good Catholic as he was, always fell before this argument of the besieging generals. La Rochelle is impregnable except to famine. The cardinal could not drive from his mind the fear he entertained of his terrible emissary, for he comprehended the strange qualities of this woman, sometimes a serpent, sometimes a lion. Had she betrayed him? Was she dead? He knew her well enough in all cases to know that whether acting for or against him, as a friend or an enemy, she would not remain motionless without great impediments. But whence did these impediments arise? That was what he could not know. And yet he reckoned, and with reason, on Milady. He had divined in the past of this woman terrible things which his red mantle alone could cover, and he felt, from one cause or another, that this woman was his own, and that she could look to no other but himself for a support superior to the danger which threatened her. He resolved then to carry on the war alone, and to look for no success foreign to himself, but as we look for a fortunate chance. He continued to press the raising of the famous dike which was to starve La Rochelle. Meanwhile he cast his eyes over that unfortunate city, which contained so much deep misery and so many heroic virtues, and recalling the sayings of Louis XI, his political predecessor, as he himself was the predecessor of Robespierre. He repeated this maxim of Tristan's gossip: divide in order to reign. Henry IV, when besieging Paris, had loaves and provisions thrown over the walls. The cardinal had little notes thrown over in which he represented to see the Rochellais how unjust, selfish, and barbarous was the conduct of their leaders. These leaders had corn in abundance and would not let them partake of it. They adopted as a maxim, for they too had maxims, that it was of very little consequence that women, children, and old men should die so long as the men who were to defend the walls remained strong and healthy. Up to that time, whether from devotedness or from want of power to act against it, this maxim, without being generally adopted, nevertheless passed from theory into practice, but the notes did it injury. The notes reminded the men that the children, women, and the old men whom they allowed to die were their sons, their wives, and their fathers, and that it would be more just for everyone to be reduced to the common misery in order that equal conditions should give birth to unanimous resolutions. These notes had all the effect that he who wrote them could expect, in that they induced a great number of inhabitants to open private negotiations with the royal army. But at the moment when the cardinal saw his means already bearing fruit, and applauded himself for having put it to action, an inhabitant of La Rochelle who had contrived to pass the royal lines, God knows how, such was the watchfulness of Bassompierre, Schomberg, and the Duc d'Angoulême, themselves watched over by the cardinal. An inhabitant of La Rochelle, we say, entered the city, coming from Portsmouth, and saying that he had seen a magnificent fleet ready to sail within 8 days. Still further, Buckingham announced to the mayor that at length the Great League was about to declare itself against France, and that the kingdom would be at once invaded by the English, Imperial, and Spanish armies. This letter was read publicly in all parts of the cities. Copies were put up at the corners of the streets, and even they who had begun to open negotiations interrupted them, being resolved to await the succor so pompously announced. This unexpected circumstance brought back Richelieu's former anxiety, and forced him, in spite of himself, once more to turn his eyes to the other side of the sea. During this time, exempt from the anxiety of its only and true chief, the royal army led a joyous life, neither provisions nor money being wanting in the camp. All the corps rivaled one another in audacity and gaiety, to take spies and hang them, to make hazardous expeditions upon the dike or the sea, to imagine wild plans, and to execute them coolly. Such were the pastimes which made the army find these days short, which were not only so long to the Rochellais, a prey to famine and anxiety, but even to the cardinal, who blockaded them so closely. Sometimes when the cardinal, always on horseback, like the lowest gendarme of the army, he cast a pensive glance over these works, so slowly keeping pace with his wishes, which the art engineers, brought from all the corners of France, were executing under his orders. If he met a musketeer of the company of Treville, he drew near and looked at him in a peculiar manner, and, not recognizing in him one of the 4 companions, he turned his penetrating look and profound thoughts in another direction. One day, when oppressed with a mortal weariness of mind, without hope in negotiations of the city, and without news from England, the cardinal went out, without any other aim than to be out of doors, and accompanied only by Cahusac and La Houdinière, strolled along the beach. Mingling the immensity of his dreams with the immensity of the ocean, he came, his horse going at a foot's pace, to a hill from the top of which he perceived behind a hedge, reclining on the sand, and catching in its passage one of those rays of the sun so rare at this period of the year, 7 men surrounded by empty bottles. 4 of these men were our musketeers, preparing to listen to a letter one of them had just received. This letter was so important that it made them forsake their cards and their dice on their drumhead. The other 3 were occupied in opening an enormous flagon of Collicure wine. These were the lackeys of these gentlemen. The cardinal was, as we have said, in very low spirits, and nothing, when he was in that state of mind, increased his depression so much as gaiety in others. Besides, he had another strange fancy, which was always to believe that the causes of his sadness created the gaiety of others. Making a sign to La Houdinière and Cahusac to stop, he alighted from his horse and went towards these suspected merry companions, hoping, by means of the sand which deadened the sound of his steps, and of the hedge which concealed his approach, to catch some words of this conversation which appeared so interesting. At 10 paces from the hedge he recognized the talkative Gascon, and as he always perceived that these men were musketeers, he did not doubt that the other three were called the Inseparables, that is to say, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. It may be supposed that his desire to hear the conversation was augmented by this discovery. His eyes took a strange expression, and with the step of a tiger cat he advanced towards the hedge. But he had not been able to catch more than a few vague syllables without any positive sense, when a sonorous and short cry made him start and attracted the attention of the musketeers. "Officer!" cried Grimaud. "You're speaking, you scoundrel," said Athos, rising upon his elbow and transfixing Grimaud with his flaming look. Grimaud, therefore, added nothing to his speech, but contented himself with pointing his index finger in the direction of the hedge, announcing by this gesture the cardinal and his escort. With a single bound, the musketeers were on their feet and saluted with respect. The cardinal seemed furious. "It appears that messieurs the musketeers keep guard," said he. "Are the English expected by land, or do the musketeers consider themselves superior officers?" "Monseigneur," replied Athos, for amid the general fright, he alone had preserved the noble calmness and coolness that never forsook him. "Monseigneur, the musketeers, when they are not on duty, and when their duty is over, drink and play at dice, and they are certainly superior officers to the lackeys." "Lackeys?" grumbled the cardinal. "Lackeys who have the order to warn their masters when anyone passes are not lackeys, they are sentinels." "Your Eminence may perceive that if we have not taken this precaution, we should have been exposed to allowing you to pass without presenting you our respects or offering you our thanks for the favor you have done in uniting us. D'Artagnan," continued Athos, "you, who but lately were so anxious for such an opportunity for expressing your gratitude to Monseigneur, here he is, avail yourself of it." These words pronounced with that imperturbable phlegm which distinguished Athos in the hour of danger, and with that excessive politeness which made of him at certain moments a king more majestic than kings by birth. D'Artagnan came forward and stammered out a few words of gratitude, which soon expired under the gloomy looks of the cardinal. "It does not signify, gentlemen," continued the cardinal, without appearing to be in the least swerved from his first intention by the diversion which Athos had started. "It does not signify, gentlemen. I do not like to have simple soldiers, because they have the advantage of serving in a privileged corps, thus to play the great lords. Discipline is the same for them as everybody else." Athos allowed the cardinal to finish his sentence completely and bowed in sign of assent. Then he resumed in his turn. "Discipline, Monseigneur, has, I hope, in no way been forgotten by us. We are not on duty, and we believe that, not being on duty, we were at liberty to dispose of our time as we pleased. If we are so fortunate thus to have some particular duty to perform for your Eminence, we are ready to obey you. Your Eminence may perceive," continued Athos, knitting his brow, for this sort of investigation began to annoy him, "that we have not come out without our arms." As he showed the cardinal with his finger the 4 muskets piled near the drum, on which the cards and dice were. "Your Eminence may believe," added D'Artagnan, "that we would have come to meet you if we could have supposed that it was Monseigneur coming towards us with so few attendants." The cardinal bit his mustache and even his lips a little. "Do you know what you look like, altogether, as you are armed and guarded by your lackeys?" said the cardinal. "You look like full conspirators.
Oh. And as to that, Monseigneur, it is true, said Athos. We do conspire, as your eminence might have seen the other morning. Only we conspire against the Rochellais.
Ah, you gentlemen of policy, replied the cardinal, knitting his brow in turn.
The secret of many unknown things might perhaps be found in your brains if we could read them as you read that letter which you concealed as soon as you saw me coming.
The color mounted to the face of Athos, and he made a step towards his eminence.
One might think you really suspected us, Monseigneur, as we were undergoing a real interrogatory. If it be so, we trust your eminence will deign to explain yourself, as we should then at least be acquainted with our real position.
And if it were an interrogatory, replied the cardinal, others besides you have undergone such, Monsieur Athos, and have replied thereto.
Thus I have told your eminence that you had but to question us, and we are ready to reply.
What was that letter you were about to read, Monsieur Aramis,
and which you have so promptly concealed?
A woman's letter, Monseigneur.
Ah, yes, I see, said the cardinal. We must be discreet with this sort of letters, but nevertheless we may show them to a confessor, and you know I have taken orders.
Monseigneur, said Athos, with a calmness the more terrible because he risked his head in making this reply.
This letter is a woman's letter, but is neither signed Marion de Lorme nor Madame d'Aiguillon.
The cardinal became pale as death. Lightning darted from his eyes. He turned round as if to give an order to Cahusac and Houdinière. Athos saw the movement. He made a step toward the muskets, upon which the other three friends had fixed their eyes, like men ill-disposed to allow themselves to be taken. The cardinalists were 3. The Musketeers, lackeys included, were 7. He judged that the match would be so much the less equal if Athos and his companions were really plotting, and by one of those rapid terms which he always had at his command, all his anger faded away into a smile.
Well, said he, you are brave, young man. Proud in daylight, faithful in darkness. We can find no fault with you for watching over yourselves when you watch so carefully over others. Gentlemen, I have not forgotten the night in which you served me as an escort to the Red Dovecot. If there were any danger to be apprehended on the road I am going, I would request you to accompany me. But as there is none, remain where you are. Finish your bottles, your game, and your letter. Adieu, gentlemen.
And remounting his horse, which Cahusac led to him, he saluted them with his hand and rode away. The 4 young men, standing and motionless, followed him with their eyes without speaking a single word until he had disappeared. Then they looked at one another. The countenance all gave evidence of terror, for notwithstanding the friendly adieu of his eminence, they plainly perceived that the cardinal went away with rage in his heart. Athos alone smiled with a self-possessed, disdainful smile. When the cardinal was out of hearing and sight,
"That Grimaud kept bad watch,"
cried Porthos, who had a great inclination to vent his ill humor on somebody. Grimaud was about to reply to excuse himself. Athos lifted his finger, and Grimaud was silent. "Would you have given up the letter, Aramis?" said D'Artagnan.
"I," said Aramis, in his most flute-like tone, "I had made up my mind. If he had insisted upon the letter being given to him, I would have presented the letter to him with one hand, and with the other I would have run my sword through his body." "I expected as much," said Athos. "That was why I threw myself between you and him. Indeed, this man is very much to blame for talking thus to other men. One would say he had never had to do with any but women and children." "My dear Athos, I admire you, but nevertheless we were in the wrong, after all." "How in the wrong?" said Athos. "Whose, then, is the air we breathe? Whose is the ocean upon which we look? Whose is the sand upon which we were reclining? Whose is that letter of your mistress? Do these belong to the cardinal? Upon my honor, this man fancies the world belongs to him. There you stood, stammering, stupefied, annihilated. One might have supposed the Bastille appeared before you, and that the gigantic Medusa had converted you into stone. Is being in love conspiring, nor in love with a woman whom the cardinal has caused to be shut up, and you wish to get her out of the hands of the cardinal? That's a match you are playing with his eminence. That letter is your game. Why should you expose your game to your adversary? That is never done. Let him find it out if he can. We can't find this.
Well, that's very sensible, Athos, said D'Artagnan.
In that case, let there be no more question of what's past, and let Aramis resume the letter from his cousin where the cardinal interrupted him.
Aramis drew the letter from his pocket, the three friends surrounded him, and the three lackeys grouped themselves near the wine jar. You had only read a line or two, said D'Artagnan. Read the letter again from the commencement.
Willingly, said Aramis. My dear cousin, I think I shall make up my mind to set out for Bethune, where my sister has placed our little servant in the convent of the Carmelites. This poor child is quite resigned, as she knows she cannot live elsewhere without the salvation of her soul being in danger. Nevertheless, if the affairs of our family are arranged, as we hope they will be, I believe she will run the risk of being damned, and will return to those she regrets, particularly as she knows they are always thinking of her. Meanwhile, she is not very wretched. What she most desires is a letter from her intended. I know that such viands pass with difficulty through convent gratings, but after all, as I have given you proofs, my dear cousin, I am not unskilled in such affairs, and I will take charge of the commission. My sister thanks you for your good and eternal remembrance. She has experienced much anxiety, and is now at length a little reassured, having sent her secretary away in order that nothing may happen unexpectedly. Adieu, my dear cousin. Tell us news of yourself as often as you can, that is to say, as often as you can with safety. I embrace you. Marie Michon.
Oh, what do I not owe to you, Aramis? Said D'Artagnan. Dear Constance, I have at length an intelligence of you. She lives. She is in safety in a convent. She is at Bethune.
Where is Bethune, Athos? Why, upon the frontiers of Artois and of Flanders. The siege once over, we shall be able to make a tour in that direction.
And that will not be long, it is to be hoped, said Porthos, for they have this morning hanged a spy who confessed that the Rochellais were reduced to the leather of their shoes. Supposing that after having eaten the leather they eat the soles, I cannot see much that is left until they eat one another.
Poor fools, said Athos, emptying a glass of excellent Bordeaux wine, which, without having at that period the reputation it now enjoys, merited it no less. Poor fools, as if the Catholic religion was not the most advantageous and the most agreeable of all religions. All the same, resumed he, after having clicked his tongue about his palate, they are brave fellows. But what the devil are you about, Aramis? Continued Athos. Why, you are squeezing that letter into your pocket.
Yes, said D'Artagnan. Athos is right, it must be burned. And yet, if we burn it, who knows whether Monsieur Cardinal had not a secret to interrogate ashes?
He must have one, said Athos.
What will you do with the letter, then? Asked Porthos.
Come here, Grimaud, said Athos. Grimaud rose and obeyed. It is a punishment for having spoken without permission, my friend. You will please to eat this piece of paper. Then, to recompense you for the service you will have rendered us, you shall afterwards drink this glass of wine. First, here is the letter. Eat heartily. Grimaud smiled, and with his eyes fixed upon the glass which Athos held in his hand, he ground the paper well between his teeth, and then swallowed it. Bravo, Monsieur Grimaud, said Athos. And now take this. That's well. We dispense with your saying grace. Grimaud silently swallowed the glass of Bordeaux wine, but his eyes, raised towards heaven during this delicious occupation, spoke a language which, though mute, was not the less expressive. And now, said Athos, unless Monsieur Cardinal should form the ingenious idea of ripping up Grimaud, I think we may be pretty much at our ease respecting the letter. Meantime, his Eminence continued his melancholy ride, murmuring between his mustaches, "These 4 men must positively be mine."
Chapter 52. Captivity. The First Day. Let us return to Milady, whom a glance thrown upon the coast of France has made us lose sight of for an instant. We shall find her still in the despairing attitude in which we left her, plunged in an abyss of dismal reflection, a dark hell at the gate of which she has almost left hope behind, because for the first time she doubts, for the first time she fears. On 2 occasions her fortune has failed her. On 2 occasions she had found herself discovered and betrayed, and on these 2 occasions it was to one fatal genius, sent doubtlessly by the Lord to combat her, that she has succumbed. D'Artagnan has conquered her, that invincible power of evil. He has deceived her in her love, humbled her in her pride, thwarted her in her ambition, and now he ruins her fortune, deprives her of liberty, and even threatens her life. Still more, he has lifted the corner of her mask, that shield with which she covered herself and which rendered her so strong. D'Artagnan has turned aside from Buckingham, whom she hates as she hates everyone she has loved, the tempest with which Richelieu threatened him in the person of the Queen. D'Artagnan had passed himself upon her as De Wardes, whom she had conceived one of her tiger-like fancies common to women of her character. D'Artagnan knows that terrible secret which she was sworn to no one shall know without dying. In short, at the moment in which she has just obtained from Richelieu a carte blanche by which the means of which she is about to take vengeance on her enemy, that this precious paper is torn from her hands, and it is D'Artagnan who holds her prisoner and is about to send her to some filthy Botany Bay, some infamous Tyburn of the Indian Ocean. All this she owes to D'Artagnan without doubt, from whom can come so many disgraces heaped upon her head, if not from him. He alone could have transmitted to Lord de Winter all these frightful secrets which he has discovered, one after another, by a train of fatalities. He knows her brother-in-law. He must have written to him. What hatred she distills! Motionless, with her burning and fixed glances in her solitary apartment, how well the outbursts of passion which at times escape from the depths of her chest with her respiration accompany the sound of the surf which rises, growls, roars, and breaks itself like an eternal and powerless despair against the rocks on which is built this dark and lofty castle. How many magnificent projects of vengeance she conceives by the light of the flashes which her tempestuous passion casts over her mind against Madame Bonacieux, against Buckingham, but above all, against D'Artagnan. Projects lost in the distance of the future. Yes, but in order to avenge herself, she must be free. And to be free, a prisoner has to pierce a wall, detach bars, cut through a floor. All undertakings which a patient and strong man may accomplish, but before which the feverish irritations of a woman must give way. Besides, to do all this, time is necessary, months, years. And she has 10 or 12 days, as Lord de Winter, her fraternal and terrible jailer, has told her. And yet, if she were a man, she would attempt all this, and perhaps might succeed. Why, then, did heaven make the mistake of placing that man-like soul in that frail and delicate body? The first moments of her captivity were terrible. A few convulsions of rage which she could not suppress paid her debt of feminine weakness to nature. But by degrees she overcame the outbursts of her mad passion, and nervous tremblings which agitated her frame disappeared, and she remained folded within herself like a fatigued serpent in repose.
Go to. Go to. I must have been mad to allow myself to be carried away so, says she, gazing into the glass which reflects back to her eyes the burning glance by which she appears to interrogate herself. No violence. Violence is the proof of weakness. In the first place, I have never succeeded by that means. Perhaps, if I employed my strength against women, I might perchance find them weaker than myself, and consequently conquer them, but it is with men that I struggle. and I am but a woman to them. Let me fight like a woman, then. My strength is in my weakness.
Then, as if to render an account to herself of the changes she could place upon her countenance, so mobile and so expressive, she made it take all expressions from that of passionate anger, which convulsed her features, to that of the most sweet, most affectionate, and most seducing smile. Then her hair assumed successively under her skilful hands all the undulations she thought might assist the charms of her face. At length she murmured, satisfied with herself,
"Come. Nothing is lost. I am still beautiful."
It was then nearly 8 o'clock in the evening. Milady perceived a bed. She calculated that the repose of a few hours would not only refresh her head and her ideas, but still further her complexion. A better idea, however, came into her mind before going to bed. She had heard something said about supper. She had already been an hour in this apartment. They could not long delay bringing her a repast. The prisoner did not wish to lose time, and she resolved to make that very evening some attempts to ascertain the nature of the ground she had to work upon, by studying the characters of the men to whose guardianship she was committed. A light appeared under the door. This light announced the reappearance of her jailers. Milady, who had arisen, threw herself quickly into the armchair, her head thrown back, her beautiful hair unbound and disheveled, her bosom half bare beneath her crumpled lace, one hand on her heart and the other hanging down. The bolts were drawn, the door groaned upon its hinges. Steps sounded in the chamber and drew near. "Place that table there," said a voice which the prisoner recognized as that of Felton. The order was executed. "You will bring lights and relieve the sentinel," continued Felton. And this double order which the young lieutenant gave to the same individuals proved to Milady that her servants were the same men as her guards, that is to say, soldiers. Felton's orders were, for the rest, executed with a silent rapidity that gave a good idea of the way in which he maintained discipline. At length Felton, who had not yet looked at Milady, turned toward her. "Aha!" said she. "She is asleep. That's well. When she wakes, she can sup." And he made some steps towards the door.
"But, my lieutenant," said a soldier, less stoical than his chief, who had approached Milady, "this woman is not asleep."
"What? Not asleep?" said Felton. "What is she doing, then?"
"She has fainted. Her face is very pale, and I have listened in vain. I do not hear her breathe."
"You are right," said Felton, after having looked at Milady from the spot at which he stood without moving a step toward her. "Go and tell Lord de Winter that his prisoner has fainted. For this event not having been foreseen, I don't know what to do." The soldier went out to obey the orders of his officer. Felton sat down upon an armchair which happened to be near the door, and waited without speaking a word, without making a gesture. Milady possessed that great art so studied by women, of looking through her long eyelashes without appearing to open the lids. She perceived Felton, who sat with his back toward her. She continued to look at him for nearly 10 minutes, and in those 2 minutes the immovable guardian never turned round once. She then thought that Lord de Winter would come, and by his presence give fresh strength to her jailer. Her first trial was lost. She acted like a woman who reckons up her resources. As a result, she raised her head, opened her eyes, and sighed deeply. At this sight, Felton turned round. "Ah, you are awake, madam," he said. "Then I have nothing more to do here. If you want anything, you can ring."
"Oh, my God! My God! How I have suffered!" said Milady, in that harmonious voice which, like that of the ancient enchantress, charmed all those who she wished to destroy. And she assumed, upon sitting upon the armchair, a still more graceful and abandoned position than when she reclined. Felton arose. "You will be served thus, madam, 3 times a day," said he. "In the morning at 9 o'clock, in the day at 1 o'clock, and in the evening at 8. If that does not suit you, you can point out what other hours you prefer, and in this respect your wishes will be complied with." "But am I to remain always alone in this vast and dismal chamber?" asked Milady.
A woman of the neighborhood has been sent for, who will be tomorrow at the castle, and will return as often as you desire her presence.
I thank you, sir,
replied the prisoner, humbly. Felton made a slight bow and directed his steps towards the door. At the moment he was about to go, Lord de Winter appeared in the corridor, followed by a soldier who had sent to inform him of the swoon of Milady. He held a vial of salts in his hand.
"Well, what is it? What is going on here?"
said he in a jeering voice, on seeing the prisoner sitting up and Felton about to go out.
"Is this corpse come to life already? Felton, my lad, did you not perceive that you were taken for a novice, and that the first act was being performed of a comedy of which we shall doubtless have the pleasure of following all of the developments?" "I thought so, my lord," said Felton, "but as the prisoner is a woman, after all, I wish to pay her the attention that every man of gentle birth owes to a woman, if not on her account, at least on my own."
Milady shuddered through her whole system. These words of Felton passed like ice through her veins.
"So," replied Lord de Winter, laughing, "that beautifully hair, so skilfully dishevelled, that white skin, and that languishing look have not seduced you, you heart of stone." "Ah, my lord," replied the impassive young man, "your lordship may be assured that it requires more than the tricks and coquetry of a woman to corrupt me."
"In that case, my brave lieutenant, let us leave Milady to find out something else, and go to supper. But be easy. She has a fruitful imagination, and the second act of the comedy will not delay its steps after the first." And at these words, Lord de Winter passed his arm through that of Felton and led him out, laughing.
"Oh, I will be a match for you,"
murmured Milady between her teeth.
"Be assured of that, you poor spoiled monk. You poor converted soldier who has cut his uniform out of a monk's frock."
"By the way,"
resumed de Winter, stopping at the threshold of the door,
"you must not, Milady, let this check take away your appetite. Taste that fowl and those fish. On my honor, they are not poisoned. I have a very good cook, and he is not to be my heir. I have full and perfect confidence in him. Do as I do. Adieu, dear sister, till your next swoon."
This was all that Milady could endure. Her hands clutched her armchair. She ground her teeth inwardly. Her eyes followed the motion of the door as it closed behind Lord de Winter and Felton, and the moment she was alone, a fresh fit of despair seized her. She cast her eyes upon the table, saw the glittering of a knife, rushed toward it and clutched it, but her disappointment was cruel. The blade was round and of flexible silver. A burst of laughter resounded from the other side of the ill-closed door, and the door reopened.
"Ha ha!" cried Lord de Winter. "Ha ha! Don't you see, my brave Felton, don't you see what I told you? That knife was for you, my lad. She would have killed you. Observe, this is one of her peculiarities, to get rid thus, after one fashion or another, of all the people who bother her. If I had listened to you, the knife would have been pointed and of steel. Then no more of Felton. She would have cut your throat, and after that everybody else's. See, John, see how well she knows how to handle a knife."
In fact, Milady still held the harmless weapon in her clenched hand, but at these last words, this supreme insult relaxed her hands, her strength, and even her will. The knife fell to the ground.
"You're right, my lord,"
said Felton, with a tone of profound disgust which sounded to the very bottom of the heart of Milady.
"You're right, my lord, and I was wrong."
And both again left the room. But this time Milady lent a more attentive ear than the first, and she heard their steps die away in the distance of the corridor.
"I am lost," she murmured. "I am lost. I am in the power of men upon whom I can have no more influence than upon statues of bronze or granite. They know me by heart, and are steeled against my weapons. It is, however, impossible that this should end as they have decreed."
In fact, as this last reflection indicated, this instinctive return to hope, sentiments of weakness or fear did not dwell long in her ardent spirit. Milady sat down to table, ate from several dishes, drank a little Spanish wine, and felt all her resolution return. Before she went to bed, she had pondered, analyzed, turned on all sides, examined on all points the words, the steps, the gestures, the signs, and even the silence of her interlocutors. And of this profound, skillful, and anxious study, the result was that Felton, everything considered, appeared the more vulnerable of her two persecutors. One expression, above all, recurred to the mind of the prisoner. if I had listened to you," Lord de Winter said to Felton. Felton then had spoken in her favor, since Lord de Winter had not been listening to him.
"Weak or strong?" repeated Milady. "That man has, then, a spark of pity in his soul. Of that spark I will make a flame that shall devour him. As to the other, he knows me. He fears me, and knows what he has to expect from me if I ever escape from his hands. It is useless, then, to attempt anything with him. But Felton, that's another thing. He is a young, ingenious, pure man who seems virtuous. Him there are means of destroying."
And Milady went to bed, and fell asleep with a smile upon her lips. Anyone who had seen her sleeping might have said that she was a young girl dreaming of a crown of flowers she was to wear on her brow at the next festival. Chapter 53. Captivity, the second day. Milady dreamed that she had at length had D'Artagnan in her power, that she was present at his execution, and it was the sight of his odious blood flowing beneath the axe of the headsman which spread that charming smile upon her lips. She slept as a prisoner sleeps, rocked by his first hope. In the morning, when they entered her chamber, she was still at bed. Felton remained in the corridor. He brought with him the woman of whom he had spoken the evening before, and who had just arrived. This woman entered and approached Milady's bed and offered her services. Milady was habitually pale. Her complexion might therefore deceive a person who saw her for the first time.
"I am in a fever," said she. "I have not slept a single instant during all this long night. I suffer horribly. Are you likely to be more humane to me than others were yesterday? All I ask is permission to remain abed."
"Would you like to have a physician called?" said the woman. Felton listened to this dialogue without speaking a word. Milady reflected that the more people she had around her, the more she would have to work upon, and Lord de Winter might redouble his watch. Besides, the physician might declare the ailment feigned, and Milady, after having lost the first trick, was not willing to lose the second.
"Go and fetch a physician?" said she. What could be the good of that? These gentlemen declared yesterday that my illness was a comedy. It would be just the same today, no doubt, for since yesterday evening they've had plenty of time to send for a doctor.
"Then," said Felton, who became patient, "say yourself, madame, what treatment do you wish followed?"
How can I tell? My God! I know that I suffer, that's all. Give me anything you like. It is of little consequence."
"Go and fetch Lord de Winter," said Felton, tired of these eternal complaints.
"Oh, no, no!" cried Milady. "No, sir, I do not call upon him, I conjure you. I am well. I want nothing. Do not call him."
She gave so much vehemence, such magnetic eloquence to this exclamation that Felton, in spite of himself, advanced some steps into the room.
"He has come," thought Milady.
"Meanwhile, madam, if you really suffer," said Felton, "a physician shall be sent for. If you deceive us, well, it will be the worse for you. But at least we shall not have to reproach ourselves with anything." Milady made no reply, but turning her beautiful head round upon her pillow, she burst into tears and uttered heart-breaking sobs. Felton surveyed her for an instant with his usual impassiveness, then, seeing that the crisis threatened to be prolonged, he went out. The woman followed him, and Lord de Winter did not appear.
"I fancy I begin to see my way,"
murmured Milady with a savage joy, burying herself under the clothes to conceal from anybody who might be watching her this burst of inward satisfaction. 2 hours passed away.
"Now it is time that the malady should be over," said she. "Let me rise, obtain some success this very day. I have but 10 days, and this evening 2 of them shall be gone."
In the morning, when they entered Milady's chamber, they had brought her breakfast. Now, she thought, they could not long delay coming to clear the table, and that Felton would reappear. Milady was not deceived. Felton reappeared, and, without observing whether Milady had or had not retouched her repast, made a sign that the table should be carried out of the room, it having been brought in ready spread. Felton remained behind. He held a book in his hand. Milady, reclining in an armchair near the chimney, beautiful, pale, and resigned, looked like a holy virgin awaiting martyrdom. Felton approached her and said, "Lord de Winter, who is a Catholic, like yourself, madame, thinking that the deprivation of the rites and ceremonies of your church might be painful to you, has consented that you should read every day the ordinary of your Mass, and here is a book which contains the ritual." At the manner in which Felton laid the book upon the little table near which Milady was sitting, at the tone in which she pronounced the two words, "your Mass," at the disdainful smile with which he accompanied them, Milady raised her head and looked more attentively at the officer. By that plain arrangement of the hair, by the costume of extreme simplicity, by the brow polished like marble and as hard and impenetrable, she recognized one of those gloomy Puritans she had so often met, not only in the court of King James, but in that of the King of France, where, in spite of the remembrance of the St. Bartholomew, they sometimes came to seek refuge. She then had one of those sudden inspirations which only people of genius receive in great crises, in supreme moments which are to decide their fortunes or their lives. Those two words, "your Mass," and a simple glance cast upon Felton revealed to her all the importance of the reply she was about to make. But with rapidity of intelligence which was peculiar to her, this reply, ready arranged, presented itself to her lips. "I," said she, with an accent of disdain in unison with that which she had remarked in the voice of the young officer. "I, sir, my Mass? Lord de Winter, the corrupted Catholic, knows very well that I am not of his religion, and this is a snare he wishes to lay for me." "And of what religion are you then, madam?" asked Felton, with astonishment which, in spite of the empire he held over himself, he could not entirely conceal. "I will tell it," cried Milady with the feigned exultation, "on the day when I shall have suffered sufficiently for my faith." The look of Felton revealed to Milady the full extent of the space she had opened for herself by this single word. The young officer, however, remained mute and motionless. His look alone had spoken. "I am in the hands of my enemies," continued she, with that tone of enthusiasm which she knew was familiar to the Puritans. "Well, let God save me, or let me perish for my God. That is the reply I beg you to make to Lord de Winter. And as to this book," added she, pointing to the manual with her finger, but without touching it, as if she must be contaminated by it, "you may carry it back and make use of it yourself, for doubtless you are doubly the accomplice of Lord de Winter, the accomplice in his persecutions, the accomplice in his heresies." Felton made no reply, took the book with the same appearance of repugnance which he had before manifested, and retired pensively. Lord de Winter came toward 5 o'clock in the evening. Milady had had time, during the whole day, to trace her plan of conduct. She received him like a woman who had already recovered all her advantages. "It appears," said the Baron, seating himself in the armchair opposite that occupied by Milady, and stretching out his legs carelessly upon the hearth, "it appears we have made a little apostasy."
"What do you mean, sir?"
"I mean to say that since we last met you have changed your religion. You have not by chance married a Protestant for a third husband, have you?"
"Explain yourself, my lord," replied the prisoner, with majesty, "for though I hear your words, I declare I do not understand them."
Then you have no religion at all. I like that best," replied Lord de Winter, laughing.
"Certainly, that is most in accord with your own principles," replied Milady, frigidly.
"Oh, I confess it is all the same to me."
"Oh, you need not avow this religious indifference, my lord. Your debaucheries and crimes would vouch for it."
"What? You talk of debaucheries? Madame Messalina, Lady Macbeth. Either I misunderstand you, or you are very shameless."
"You only speak thus because you are overheard," coolly replied Milady, "as you wish to interest your jailers and your hangmen against me."
"My jailers and my hangmen! Heyday, madam! You are taking a poetical tone, and the comedy of yesterday turns to a tragedy this evening. As to the rest, in 8 days you will be where you ought to be, and my task will be completed."
"Infamous task! Impious task!"
cried Milady, with the exultation of a victim who provokes his judge.
"My word," said de Winter, rising, "I think this hussy is going mad. Come, come, calm yourself, Madam Puritan, or I'll move you to a dungeon. It's my Spanish wine that has got into your head, is it not? But never mind, that sort of intoxication is not dangerous, and we'll have no bad effects.
And Lord de Winter retired, swearing, which, at this period, was a very knightly habit. Felton was indeed behind the door, and had not lost one word of this scene. Milady had guessed right.
Yes, yes, go, said she to her brother. The effects are drawing near. On the contrary, but you, weak fool, will not see them until it is too late to shun them.
Silence was re-established. 2 hours passed away. Milady's supper was brought in, and she was found deeply engaged in saying her prayers aloud, prayers which she had learned of an old servant of her second husband, a most austere Puritan. She appeared to be in ecstasy, and did not pay the least attention to what was going on around her. Felton made a sign that she should not be disturbed, and when all was arranged, he went out quietly with the soldiers. Milady knew she might be watched, so she continued her prayers to the end, and it appeared to her that the soldier who was on duty at her door did not march with the same step, and seemed to listen. For the moment she wished nothing better. She arose, came to the table, ate but little, and drank only water. An hour after, her table was cleared, but Milady remarked that this time Felton did not accompany the soldier. He feared, then, to see her too often. She turned toward the wall to smile, for there was in this smile such an expression of triumph that this smile alone would have betrayed her. She allowed, therefore, half an hour to pass away, and as at that moment all was silence in the old castle, as nothing was heard but the eternal murmur of the waves, that immense breaking of the ocean, with her pure, harmonious, and powerful voice, she began the first couplet of the psalm, then in great favor with the Puritans.
Thou leavest thy servants, Lord, to see if they be strong, but soon thou dost afford thy hand to lead them on.
These verses were not excellent, very far from it, but as it is well known, the Puritans did not pique themselves upon their poetry. While singing, Milady listened. The soldier on guard at her door stopped, as if he had been changed into stone. Milady was then able to judge of the effect she had produced. Then she continued her singing with inexpressible fervor and feeling. It appeared to her that the sound spread to a distance beneath her vaulted roofs, and carried with them a magic charm to soften the hearts of her jailers. It, however, likewise appeared that the soldier on duty, a zealous Catholic no doubt, shook off the charm, for through the door he called, "Hold your tongue, madam. Your song is as dismal as De Profundis, and if, besides the pleasure of being in a garrison here, we must hear such things as these, no mortal can hold out." "Silence!" Then another exclaimed stern voice, which Milady recognized as that of Felton. "What are you meddling with, stupid? Did anybody order you to prevent that woman from singing? No. You were told to guard her, to fire at her as if she attempted to fly. Guard her. If she flies, kill her. Don't exceed your orders." An expression of unspeakable joy lightened the countenance of Milady, but this expression was fleeting, as the reflection of lightning. Without appearing to have heard the dialogue, of which she had not lost a word, she began again, giving to her voice all the charm, all the power, all the seduction the demon had bestowed upon it.
For all my tears, my cares, my exile, and my chains, I have my youth, my prayers, and God who counts my pains.
Her voice, of immense power and sublime expression, gave to the rude, unpolished poetry of the Psalms a magic and an effect which the most exalted Puritans rarely found in the songs of their brethren, and which they were forced to ornament with all the resources of their imagination. Felton believed he heard the singing of an angel who consoled the 3 Hebrews in the furnace. Milady continued,
One day our doors will ope, with God come our desire, and if betrays that hope, to death we can aspire.
This verse, into which the terrible enchantress threw her whole soul, completed the trouble which had seized the heart of the young officer. He opened the door quickly, and Milady saw him appear, pale as usual, but with his eye inflamed and almost wild. "Why do you sing thus, and with such a voice?" said he.
Your pardon, sir,
said Milady, with mildness.
I forgot that my songs are out of place in this castle. I have perhaps offended you in your creed, but it was without wishing to do so, I swear. Pardon me, then, a fault which is perhaps great, but which certainty was involuntary.
Milady was so beautiful at this moment. This religious ecstasy in which she appeared to be plunged gave such an expression to her countenance that Felton was so dazzled that he fancied he beheld the angel whom he had only just before heard. "Yes, yes," said he, "you disturb, you agitate the people who live in the castle." The poor, senseless young man was not aware of the incoherence of his words, while Milady was reading with her lynx's eyes the very depths of his heart.
"I will be silent, then,"
said Milady, casting down her eyes with all the sweetness she could give her voice and with all the resignation she could impress upon her manner. "No, no, madame," said Felton. "Only do not sing so loud, particularly at night." And at these words, Felton, feeling that he could not long maintain his severity toward his prisoner, rushed out of the room. "You have done right, Lieutenant," said the soldier. "Such songs disturb the mind, and yet we have become accustomed to them. Her voice is so beautiful." Chapter 54. Captivity, the third day. Felton had fallen, but there was still another step to be taken. He must be retained, or rather, he must be left quite alone, and Milady but obscurely perceived the means which could lead to this result. Still, more must be done. He must be made to speak in order that he might be spoken to, for Milady very well knew that her greatest seduction was in her voice, which so skillfully ran over the whole gamut of tones from human speech to language celestial. In spite of all this seduction, Milady might fail, for Felton was forewarned, and that against the least chance. From that moment she watched all his actions, all his words, from the simplest glance of his eyes to his gestures, even to a breath that could be interpreted as a sigh. In short, she studied everything, as a skillful comedian does to whom a new part has been assigned in a line to which he is not accustomed. Face to face with Lord de Winter, her plan of conduct was more easy. She had laid that down the preceding evening, to remain silent and dignified in his presence, from time to time to irritate him by affected disdain, by a contemptuous word, to provoke him to threats of violence which would produce a contrast with her own resignation. Such was her plan. Felton would see all. Perhaps he would say nothing, but he would see. In the morning, Felton came as usual, but Milady allowed him to preside over all the preparations for breakfast without addressing a word to him. At the moment when he was about to retire, she was cheered with a ray of hope, for she thought he was about to speak, but his lips moved without any sound leaving his mouth, and making a powerful effort to control himself, he sent back to his heart the words that were about to escape from his lips, and went out. Toward midday, Lord de Winter entered. It was a tolerably fine winter's day, and a ray of that pale English sun which lights but does not warm came through the bars of her prison. Milady was looking out at the window and pretended not to hear the door as it opened. "Ah, ah!" said Lord de Winter. "After having played comedy, after having played tragedy, we are now playing melancholy." The prisoner made no reply. "Yes, yes," continued Lord de Winter, "I understand. You would like very well to be at liberty on that beach. You would like very well to be in a good ship dancing upon the waves of that emerald green sea. You would like very well, either on land or on ocean, to lay for me one of those nice little ambuscades you are so skillful in planning. Patience, patience. In 4 days' time, the shore will be beneath your feet. The sea will be open to you, more open than will perhaps be agreeable to you, for in 4 days England will be relieved of you." Milady folded her hands, and, raising her fine eyes towards heaven,
"Lord, Lord,"
said she, with that angelic meekness of gesture and tone,
"pardon this man as I myself pardon him."
"Yes, pray, accursed woman," cried the Baron. "Your prayer is so much more the more generous from your being. I swear to you, in the power of a man who will never pardon you." And he went out. At the moment he went out, a piercing glance darted through the opening of the nearly closed door, and she perceived Felton, who drew quickly to one side to prevent being seen by her. Then she threw herself upon her knees and began to pray.
My God, said she, thou knowest in what holy cause I suffer. Give me then strength to suffer.
The door opened gently. The beautiful supplicant pretended not to hear the noise, and in a voice broken by tears she continued,
God of vengeance, God of goodness, wilt thou allow the frightful projects of this man to be accomplished?
Then only she pretended to hear the sound of Felton's footsteps, and rising quick as a thought, she blushed, as if ashamed of being surprised on her knees. I do not like to disturb those who pray, madame, said Felton, seriously. Do not disturb yourself on my account, I beseech you.
How do you know I was praying, sir? Said Milady in a voice broken by sobs. You were deceived, sir. I was not praying.
Do you not think, then, madame, replied Felton, in the same serious voice, but with a milder tone, do you think I assume the right of preventing a creature from prostrating herself before her Creator? God forbid! Besides, repentance becomes the guilty, and of the crimes they have committed, for me, the guilty are sacred at the feet of God.
Guilty? I?
Said Milady, with a smile which might have disarmed the angel of the last judgment.
Guilty? Oh, my God, thou knowest whether I am guilty. Say I am condemned, sir, if you please, but you know that God, who loves martyrs, sometimes permits the innocent to be condemned.
Were you condemned? Were you innocent? Were you a martyr? Replied Felton. The greater would be the necessity for prayer, and I myself would aid you with my prayers.
Oh, you are a just man,
cried Milady, throwing herself at his feet.
I can hold out no longer, for I fear I shall be wanting in strength at the moment when I shall be forced to undergo the struggle. I confess my faith. Listen, then, to the supplication of a despairing woman. You are abused, sir, but that is not the question. I only ask you one favor, and if you grant it to me, I will bless you in the world and in the next.
Speak to the master, madam, said Felton. Happily I am neither charged with pardon or pardoning nor punishing. It is upon one higher place than I am that God has laid this responsibility.
To you, no, to you alone. Listen to me, rather than add to my destruction, rather than add to my ignominy.
If you have merited this shame, madam, if you have incurred this ignominy, you must submit to it as an offering to God.
What do you say? Oh, you do not understand me. When I speak of ignominy, you think I speak of some chastisement or imprisonment or death. Would to heaven! Of what consequence to me is imprisonment or death?
It is I who no longer understand you, madame, said Felton.
Or rather, who pretend not to understand me, sir,
replied the prisoner, with a smile of incredulity. No, madame, on the honor of a soldier, on the faith of a Christian.
What, are you ignorant of Lord de Winter's designs upon me?
I am.
Impossible, you are his confidant.
I never lie, madam.
Oh, he conceals them too little for you not to divine them.
I seek to divine nothing, madam. I wait till I am confided in, and apart from that which Lord de Winter has said to me before, he has confided nothing to me.
Why, then,
cried Milady, with an incredible tone of truthfulness,
you are not his accomplice? You do not know that he destines me to disgrace which all the punishments of the world cannot equal in horror?
You are deceived, madam, said Felton, blushing. Lord de Winter is not capable of such a crime.
Good, said Milady to herself. Without thinking what it is, he calls it a crime.
Then aloud,
the friend of that wretch is capable of everything.
Whom do you call that wretch? Asked Felton.
Are here, then, in England, two men who can such an epithet can be applied?
You mean George Villiers? Asked Felton, whose looks became excited.
Whom pagans and unbelieving Gentiles call Duke of Buckingham, replied Milady. I could not have thought that there was an Englishman in all England who would so required so long an explanation to make him understand of whom I was speaking.
The hand of the Lord is stretched over him, said Felton. He will not escape the chastisement he deserves. Felton only expressed, with regard to the Duke, the feeling of execration which all the English had declared toward him, whom the Catholics themselves called the extortioner, the pillager, the debauchee, and whom the Puritans styled simply Satan.
Oh, my God, cried Milady. whom I supplicate thee to pour upon this man the chastisement which is his due. Thou knowest it is not my own vengeance I pursue, but the deliverance of a whole nation that I implore.
Do you know him, then? Asked Felton.
At length he interrogates me,
said Milady to herself, at the height of joy at having obtained so quickly such a great result.
Oh, you know him? Yes. Yes. To my misfortune, to my eternal misfortune,
said Milady, twisted her arms as if in a paroxysm of grief. Felton, no doubt, felt within himself that strength was abandoning him, and he made several steps towards the door, but the prisoner, whose eyes never left him, sprang in pursuit of him and stopped him.
Sir, cried she, be kind, be clement. Listen to my prayer. That knife which the fatal prudence of the Baron deprived me of, because he knows the use I would make of it. Oh, hear me to the end. That knife, give it to me for only a moment, only for mercy, for pity's sake. I will embrace your knees. You shall shut the door that you may be certain I contemplate no injury to you, my God. To you, the only just, good, and compassionate being I have met with. To you, my preserver, perhaps. 1 minute that knife, 1 minute, a single minute, and I will restore it to you through the grating of the door. Only 1 minute, Mr. Felton, and you will have saved my honor.
To kill yourself?
Cried Felton, with terror, forgetting to withdraw his hands from the hands of the prisoner.
To kill yourself?
I have told, sir,
murmured Milady, lowering her voice and allowing herself to sink overpowered to the ground.
I have told my secret. He knows all. My God, I am lost.
Felton remained standing, motionless and undecided. He still doubts, thought Milady.
I have not been earnest enough.
Someone was heard in the corridor. Milady recognized the step of Lord de Winter. Felton recognized it also and made a step toward the door. Milady sprang toward him.
Oh, not a word,
she said in a concentrated voice.
Not a word of all I have said to you to this man, or I am lost. And it would be you.
Then as the steps drew near, she became silent for fear of being heard, applying with a gesture of infinite terror her beautiful hand to Felton's mouth. Felton gently repulsed Milady, and she sank into a chair. Lord de Winter passed before the door without stopping, and they heard the noise of his footsteps soon die away. Felton, as pale as death, remained some instants with his ear bent and listening. Then, when the sound was quite extinct, he breathed like a man awakening from a dream, and rushed out of the apartment.
Ah,
said Milady, listening in her turn to the noise of Felton's steps, which withdrew in a direction opposite to those of Lord de Winter.
At length you are mine.
Then her brow darkened.
If he tells the Baron, said she, I am lost, for the Baron, who knows very well I shall not kill myself, will place me before him with a knife in my hand, and he will discover that all this despair is but acted.
She placed herself before the glass and regarded herself attentively. Never had she appeared more beautiful.
Oh, yes,
said she, smiling.
But he won't tell him.
In the evening, Lord de Winter accompanied the supper.
Sir, said Milady, is your presence an indispensable accessory of my captivity? Could you not spare me the increase of torture which your visits cause me?
How, dear sister, said Lord de Winter, did you not sentimentally inform me that with that pretty mouth of yours, so cruel to me today, that you came to England solely for the pleasure of seeing me at your ease? An enjoyment of which you told me so sensibly felt the deprivation that you had risked everything for it. Seasickness, tempest, captivity. Well, here I am. Be satisfied. Besides, this time my visit has a motive.
Milady trembled. She thought Felton had told all. Perhaps never in her life had this woman, who had experienced so many opposite and powerful emotions, felt her heart beat so violently. She was seated. Lord de Winter took a chair, drew it toward her, and sat down close beside her. Then, taking a paper out of his pocket, he unfolded it slowly.
Here, said he, I want to show you the kind of passport which I have drawn up, and which will serve you henceforth as a rule of order in the life I consent to leave you.
Then, turning his eyes from Milady to the paper, he read,
Order to conduct. The name is blank.
interrupted Lord de Winter. "If you have any preference, you can point it out to me, and if not, be within 1,000 leagues of London, attention will be paid to your wishes." I'll begin again, then. "Order to conduct to the person named Charlotte Baxon, branded by the justice of the Kingdom of France, but liberated after chastisement. She is to dwell in this place without ever going more than 3 leagues from it. In any case of any attempt to escape, the penalty of death to be applied. She shall receive 5 shillings per day for lodging and food."
"That order does not concern me," replied Milady coldly, "since it bears another name than mine."
"A name? Have you a name, then?"
"I bear that of your brother."
"Ah, but you are mistaken. My brother is only your second husband, and your first is still living. Tell me his name, and I will put it in the place of the name of Charlotte Baxon." "No, you will not. You are silent. Well, then you must be registered as Charlotte Baxon."
Milady remained silent, only this time it was no longer from affectation, but from terror. She believed the order ready for execution. She thought that Lord de Winter had hastened her departure. She thought she was condemned to set off that very evening, everything in her mind lost for an instant, when all at once she perceived that no signature was attached to the order. The joy she felt at this discovery was so great she could not conceal it.
"Yes, yes," said Lord de Winter, who perceived what was passing in her mind. "Yes, you look for the signature, and you say to yourself, all is not lost, for that order is not signed. It is only shown to me to terrify me, that's all. You are mistaken. Tomorrow this order will be sent to the Duke of Buckingham. The day after tomorrow it will return signed by his hand and marked with his seal, and 24 hours afterward I will answer for it being carried into execution. Adieu, madame. That is all I had to say to you."
"And I reply to you, sir, that this abuse of power, this exile under a fictitious name, are infamous."
"Would you like better to be hanged in your true name, milady? You know that the English laws are inexorable on the abuse of marriage. Speak freely. Although my name, or rather that of my brother, would be mixed up with the affair, I will risk the scandal of a public trial to make myself certain of getting rid of you."
Milady made no reply, but became as pale as a corpse.
"Oh, I see you prefer peregrination. Well, that's well, madame. There's an old proverb that says, 'Traveling trains youth.' My faith, you're not wrong after all, and life is sweet. That's the reason why I take such care you shall not deprive me of mine. There only remains, then, the question of the 5 shillings to be settled. You think me rather parsimonious, don't you? That's because I don't care to leave you the means of corrupting your jailers. Besides, you will always have your charms left to seduce them with. Employ them, if your check with regard to Felton has not disgusted you with attempts of that kind."
"Felton has not told him," said Milady to herself. "Nothing is lost, then."
"And now, madame, till I see you again, tomorrow I will come and announce to you the departure of my messenger." Lord de Winter rose, saluted her ironically, and went out.
Milady breathed again.
She still had 4 days before her. 4 days would quite suffice to complete the seduction of Felton. A terrible idea, however, rushed into her mind. She thought that Lord de Winter would perhaps send Felton himself to get the order signed by the Duke of Buckingham. In that case, Felton would escape her, for in order to secure success, the magic of a continuous seduction was necessary. Nevertheless, as we have said, one circumstance reassured her. Felton had not spoken. As she would not appear to be agitated by the threats of Lord de Winter, she placed herself at the table and ate. Then, as she had done the evening before, she fell on her knees and repeated her prayers aloud. As on the evening before, the soldier stopped his march to listen to her. Soon after, she heard lighter steps than those of the sentinel, which came from the end of the corridor and stopped before her door.
"It is he,"
said she. And she began the same religious chant which had so strongly excited Felton the evening before. But although her voice, sweet, full, and sonorous, vibrated as harmoniously and as affectingly as ever, the door remained shut. It appeared, however, to Milady that in one of the furtive glances she darted from time to time at the grating of the door, she thought she saw the ardent eyes of the young man through the narrow opening. But whether this was a reality or vision, he had this time sufficient self-command not to enter. However, a few instants after she had finished her religious song, Milady thought she heard a profound sigh. Then came the same steps she heard approach slowly withdrew,
as if with regret. Chapter 55. Captivity, the 4th day. The next day, when Felton entered Milady's apartment, he found her standing, mounted upon a chair, holding in her hands a cord, made by means of torn cambric handkerchiefs, twisted into a kind of rope one with another and tied at the ends. At the noise Felton made in entering, Milady leaped lightly to the ground and tried to conceal behind her the improvised cord she held in her hand. The young man was more pale than usual, and his eyes, reddened by want of sleep, denoted that he had passed a feverish night. Nevertheless, his brow was armed with a severity more austere than ever. He advanced slowly toward Milady, who had seated herself, and taking an end of the murderous rope which, by neglect, and perhaps by design, she allowed to be seen.
"What is this, madame?"
he asked coldly.
"That? Nothing,"
said Milady, smiling with that painful expression which she knew so well how to give her smile.
"Ennui is the mortal enemy of prisoners. I had ennui, and I amused myself with twisting that rope."
Felton turned his eyes toward the part of the wall of the apartment before which he had found Milady standing in the armchair in which she was now seated, and over her head he perceived a gilt-headed screw fixed in the wall for the purpose of hanging up clothes or weapons. He started, and the prisoner saw that start, for though her eyes were cast down, nothing escaped her.
"What were you doing on that armchair?"
asked he.
"Of what consequence?"
replied Milady.
"But," replied Felton, "I wish to know."
"Do not question me," said the prisoner. "You know that we who are true Christians are forbidden to lie."
"Well, then," said Felton, "I will tell you what you are doing, or rather what you meant to do. You are going to complete the fatal project you cherish in your mind. Remember, madam, if our God forbids falsehood, he much more severely condemns suicide."
"When God sees one of his creatures persecuted unjustly, placed between suicide and dishonor, believe me, sir,"
replied Milady in a tone of deep conviction,
"God pardons suicide, for then suicide becomes martyrdom."
"You say either too much or too little. Speak, madam, in the name of heaven. Explain yourself."
"That I may relate my misfortunes for you to treat them as fables? That I may tell you my projects for you to go and betray them to my persecutor? No, sir. Besides, of what importance to you is the life or death of a condemned wretch? You are only responsible for my body, is it not so? And provided you produce a carcass that may be recognized as mine, they will require no more of you. Nay, perhaps you will even have a double reward."
"I, madam, I?" cried Felton. "You suppose that I would ever accept the price of your life? Oh, you cannot believe what you say."
"Let me act as I please, Felton, let me act as I please," said Milady, elated. "Every soldier must be ambitious, must he not? You are a lieutenant. Well, will you follow me to the grave with the rank of captain?"
"What have I done, then, done to you?" said Felton, much agitated, "that you should load me with such a responsibility before God and before men? In a few days you will be away from this place. Your life, madam, will then no longer be under my care, and," added he with a sigh, "then you can do what you will with it."
"So,"
cried Milady, as if she could not resist giving utterance to a holy indignation,
"you, a pious man, you who are called a just man, you ask but one thing, and that is that you may not be inculpated, annoyed by my death?"
"It is my duty to watch over your life, madam, and I will watch."
"But do you understand the mission you are fulfilling? Cruel enough if I am guilty, but what name can you give it? What name will the Lord give it if I am innocent?"
"I am a soldier, madam, and fulfill the orders I have received."
"Do you believe, then, that at the day of the last judgment God will separate blind executioners from iniquitous judges? You are not willing that I should kill my body, and you make yourself the agent of him who would kill my soul."
"But I repeat it again to you," replied Felton, in great emotion, "no danger threatens for you. I will answer for Lord de Winter as for myself."
"Dunce!" cried Milady. "Dunce! Who dares to answer for another man, when the wisest, when those most after God's own heart, hesitate to answer for themselves, and who ranges himself on the side of the strongest and most fortunate, to crush the weakest and the most unfortunate?"
"Impossible, madam, impossible!"
murmured Felton, who felt to the bottom of his heart the justness of this argument.
"A prisoner! You will not recover your liberty through me, living. You will not lose your life through me."
Yes, cried Milady, but I shall lose that which is much dearer to me than life. I shall lose my honor, Felton, and it is you whom I make responsible before God and before men for my shame and my infamy.
This time Felton, immovable as he was, or appeared to be, could not resist the secret influence which had already taken possession of him. To see this woman, so beautiful, fair as the brightest vision, to see her, by turns, overcome with grief and threatening, to resist at once the ascendancy of grief and beauty, it was too much for a visionary. It was too much for a brain weakened by the ardent dreams of an ecstatic faith. It was too much for the heart furrowed by love of heaven that burns, by the hatred of men that devours. Milady saw the trouble. She felt by intuition the flame of the opposing passions which burned with the blood in the veins of the young fanatic. As a skillful general, seeing the enemy ready to surrender, marches toward him with a cry of victory, she rose. Beautiful as an antique priestess, inspired like a Christian virgin, her arms extended, her throat uncovered, her hair disheveled, holding with one hand her rope modestly drawn over her breast, her look illuminated by that fire which had already created such disorder in the veins of the young Puritan, and went toward him, crying out with a vehement air and in her melodious voice, to which on this occasion she communicated a terrible energy.
Let this victim to Baal be sent, to the lions the martyr be thrown. Thy God shall teach thee to repent, from thy abyss he'll give ear to my moan.
Felton stood before the strange apparition like one petrified. "Who art thou? Who art thou?" cried he, clasping his hands. "Art thou a messenger from God? Art thou a minister from hell? Art thou an angel or a demon? Callest thyself Eloa or Astarte?"
Do you not know me, Felton? I am neither angel nor demon. I am the daughter of earth. I am a sister of thy faith, that is all.
"Yes, yes," said Felton. "I doubted, but now I believe."
You believe? And still you are an accomplice of that child Belial who is called Lord de Winter. You believe, and yet you leave me in the hands of mine enemies, of the enemy of England, of the enemy of God. You believe, and yet you deliver me up to him who fills and defiles the world with the heresies and debaucheries, to that infamous Sardanapalus, of whom the blind call the Duke of Buckingham, and whom believers name Antichrist."
"I deliver you up to Buckingham? I? What mean you by that?"
"They have eyes," cried Milady, "but they see not. Ears have they, but they hear not."
"Yes, yes,"
said Felton, passing his hand over his brow, covered with sweat as if to remove his last doubt.
"Yes, I recognize the voice which speaks to me in my dreams. Yes, I recognize the features of the angel who appears to me every night, crying to my soul which cannot sleep, 'Strike! Save England! Save thyself, for thou wilt die without having appeared, God!' Speak! Speak!" cried Felton. "I can understand you now."
A flash of terrible joy, but rapid as thought, gleamed from the eyes of Milady. However fugitive this homicide flash, Felton saw it, and started as if its light had revealed the abysses of the woman's heart. He recalled all at once the warnings of Lord de Winter, the seductions of Milady, her first attempts after her arrival. He drew back a step and hung down his head, without, however, ceasing to look at her, as if fascinated by the strange feature. He could not detach his eyes from her. Milady was not a woman to misunderstand the meaning of this hesitation. Under her apparent emotions, her icy coolness never abandoned her. Before Felton replied, and before she could be forced to resume this conversation, so difficult to be sustained in the same exalted tone, she let her hands fall, and as if the weakness of a woman overpowered the enthusiasm of the inspired fanatic, she said,
"But no, it is not for me to be the Judith to deliver Bethulia from this Holofernes. The sword of the Eternal is too heavy for my arm. Allow me then to avoid dishonor by death. Let me take refuge in martyrdom. I do not ask you for liberty as a guilty one would, nor for vengeance as would a pagan. Let me die, that is all. I supplicate you, I implore you on my knees. Let me die, and my last sigh shall be a blessing for my preserver."
Hearing that voice so sweet and suppliant, seeing that look so timid and downcast, Felton reproached himself. By degrees, the enchantress had clothed herself with that magic adornment which she assumed and threw aside at will. That is to say, beauty, meekness, and tears, and above all, the irresistible attraction of mystical voluptuousness, the most devouring of all voluptuousness.
"Alas," said Felton, "I can do but one thing, which is to pity you if you prove to me you are a victim. But Lord de Winter makes cruel accusations against you. You are a Christian. You are my sister in religion. I feel myself drawn towards you. I, who have never loved anyone but my benefactor. I, who have met with nothing but traitors and impious men. But you, madam, so beautiful in reality, you, so pure in appearance, must have committed great iniquities for Lord de Winter to pursue you thus."
"They have eyes," repeated Milady, with an accent of indescribable grief, "but they see not. Ears have they, but they hear not."
"But," cried the young officer, "speak, then, speak!"
"Confide my shame to you," cried Milady, with the blush of modesty upon her countenance, "for often the crime of one becomes the shame of another. Confide my shame to you, a man, and I a woman? Oh," continued she, placing her hand modestly over her beautiful eyes, "never, never! I could not."
"To me? To a brother?" said Felton.
Milady looked at him for some time with an expression which the young man took for doubt, but which, however, was nothing but observation, or rather the wish to fascinate. Felton, in his turn a suppliant, clasped his hands.
"Well, then," said Milady, "I confide in my brother. I will dare to."
At this moment the steps of Lord de Winter were heard, but this time the terrible brother-in-law of Milady did not content himself, as on the preceding day, with passing before the door and going away. He paused, exchanged 2 words with the sentinel, then the door opened, and he appeared. During the exchange of these 2 words, Felton drew back quickly, and when Lord de Winter entered, he was several paces from the prisoner. The Baron entered slowly, sending a scrutinizing glance from Milady to the young officer.
"You have been here a very long time, John," said he. "Has this woman been relating her crimes to you? In that case, I can comprehend the length of the conversation."
Felton started, and Milady felt she was lost if she did not come to the assistance of the disconcerted Puritan.
"Ah, you fear your prisoner should escape," said she. "Well, ask your worthy jailer what favor I this instant solicited of him."
"You demanded a favor," said the Baron suspiciously. "Yes, my lord," replied the young man, confused. "And what favor, pray?" asked Lord de Winter. "A knife, which she would return to me through the grating of a door a minute after she had received it," replied Felton. "There is someone, then, concealed here whose throat this amiable lady is desirous of cutting?" said de Winter, in an ironical, contemptuous tone.
"There is myself."
"I have given you the choice between America and Tyburn," replied Lord de Winter. "Choose Tyburn, madam. Believe me, the cord is more certain than the knife."
Felton grew pale and made a step forward, remembering that at the moment he entered Milady had a rope in her hand.
"You are right. I have often thought of it."
Then she added in a low voice,
"And I will think of it again."
Felton felt a shudder run to the marrow of his bones. Probably Lord de Winter perceived this emotion. "Mistrust yourself, John," said she. "I have placed reliance upon you, my friend. Beware, I have warned you. But be of good courage, my lad. In 3 days we shall be delivered from this creature, and where I shall send her, she can harm nobody."
"You hear him?"
cried Milady, with vehemence, so that the Baron might believe she was addressing heaven, and that Felton might understand she was addressing him. Felton lowered his head and reflected. The Baron took the young officer by the arm, and turning his head over his shoulder so as not to lose sight of Milady till he was gone out.
"Well," said the prisoner when the door was shut, "I am not so far advanced as I believed. De Winter has changed his usual stupidity into a strange prudence. It is the desire of vengeance, and how desire molds a man. As to Felton, he hesitates. Ah, he is not a man like that cursed D'Artagnan. A Puritan only adores virgins. and he adores them by clasping his hands. A musketeer loves women, and he loves them by clasping his arms around them.
Milady waited then, with much impatience, for she feared the day would pass away without her seeing Felton again. At last, in an hour after the scene we have just described, she heard someone speaking in a low voice at the door. Presently the door opened, and she perceived Felton. The young man advanced rapidly into the chamber, leaving the door open behind him, and making a sign to Milady to be silent. His face was much agitated.
"What do you want with me?"
said she. "Listen," replied Felton, in a low voice. "I have just sent away the sentinel that I might remain here without anybody knowing it, in order to speak to you without being overheard. The Baron has just related a frightful story to me." Milady assumed her smile of a resigned victim and shook her head. "Either you are a demon," continued Felton, "or the Baron, my benefactor. My father is a monster. I have known you 4 days. I have loved him 4 years. I therefore may hesitate between you. Be not alarmed at what I say. I want to be convinced. Tonight after 12 I will come and see you, and you shall convince me."
"No, Felton, no, my brother," said she. "The sacrifice is too great, and I feel what it must cost you. No, I am lost. Do not be lost with me. My death will be much more eloquent than my life, and the silence of the corpse will convince you much better than the words of the prisoner."
"Be silent, madame," cried Felton, "and do not speak to me thus. I came to entreat you to promise me upon your honor to swear to me by what you hold most sacred that you will make no attempt upon your life."
"I will not promise," said Milady, "for no one has more respect for a promise or an oath than I have, and if I promise, I must keep it."
"Well," said Felton, "only promise till you have seen me again. If, when you have seen me again, you still persist, well, then you shall be free, and I will give you the weapon you desire."
"Well," said Milady, "for you I will wait."
"Swear."
"I swear it, by our God. Are you satisfied?"
"Well," said Felton, "till tonight."
And he darted out of the room, shut the door, and waited in the corridor, the soldier's half-pike in his hand, and as if he had mounted guard in his place. The soldier returned, and Felton gave him back his weapon. Then, through the grating to which she had drawn near, Milady saw the young man make a sign with delirious fervor, and depart in an apparent transport of joy. As for her, she returned to her place with a smile of savage contempt upon her lips, and repeated, blaspheming, that terrible name of God by whom she had just sworn without ever having learned to know him. "My God," said she.
"What a senseless fanatic! My God, it is I, and this fellow who will help me to avenge myself."